There's been numerous debates about why women in the WNBA don't get paid as much as men in the NBA, and I'm here to give some very unfortunate and uncomfortable truths. Most people tend to watch the NBA for its excitement, its complexity of the game, as well as its nostalgia or familiarity. Most people, when they think basketball, they tend to think of the NBA. When you think about the number of stars that are in the NBA, a bunch of players come to mind. LeBron James, KD, Luka Doncic. The list goes on. There's a million players. There's even a whole bunch of them that have got jerseys right behind me. When you think of the WNBA, there's definitely stars. We can think of players like Kelsey Plum. We can also think of players like Sabrina Ionescu. But a lot of players don't necessarily jump to mind when you're thinking of total stars in the WNBA. And a lot of that has to do with the volume of players. There isn't as many players in the WNBA as there is in the NBA. The WNBA has a total of 144 roster players playing for 12 teams versus 450 roster players for 30 teams. That's more than double players and double the amount of teams. It's not going to be comparable. What's good, everybody out there? Thanks again for checking in with Court Thoughts, the channel where we basically talk basketball. I just want to start off by explaining that I don't have a problem with the game in the WNBA, but I find it illogical to compare the WNBA to the NBA, so I really wanted to explore this as a topic on this channel. Now, first and foremost, if you are unfamiliar with my channel is all about basketball. This is literally the home of hoops. I do explore players and skill sets of guys and girls all over the world, and I don't have a bias to what gender a player is or where they come from. If you're a hooper, I got love for you, and I want to explore what makes you great. Now, I've got 3 points that I'm going to cover off exactly why the WNBA is not equal to the NBA. But in order to do that, I have to give a shout out to a website that I grabbed all this information from, which is Statista.com. All the numbers that I grabbed, everything that I literally grabbed that had a value, I grabbed it from Statista.com. Big shout out. I signed up. It was for free. It's not a sponsorship or anything like that, but it's just a website that I thought was a really good resource to understand why there was a gap. First point that I'm going to make is demand creates revenue gap. In order to understand the gap between the NBA and the WNBA, we really have to understand some numbers about viewership and about attendees. Viewership for the NBA on average is about 1.712 million viewers. So that's 1.712 million viewers tuning in onto ESPN or NBA.com, like any of those membership sites, in order to watch the game. If we compare that against the WNBA, the average viewership is 505K, a vastly different value. We're looking at about less than 1/3 of the amount of viewers of an NBA game. So you've got less viewers. Now, the average amount of attendees coming to a game is about 18,000 for a NBA game in comparison to 6,500. Now, these are both regular season games. Again, you're looking at about 1/3. Now, why does that matter? People watching the game and people coming to the game are the immediate revenue sources that generate income in order for players to be paid. Now, we have to understand this. Media companies will pay for the rights in order to air those games. That's why across the years, you've seen companies like ABC, NBC, ESPN, CBS buy the rights in order to share that product. And it's a very valuable product for them because it means that they're getting more viewers. They can, then use more ads and generate revenue and all that sort of stuff. People coming to the games pay their hard-earned money to buy drinks, to buy product and merchandise, to watch the actual players play. And that essentially goes to the owners, who are then distributing it across their organization to pay their players, to pay their staff, to pay the people working at the hot dog stand or the popcorn stand or any of that other stuff, right? In order to watch it. You have 3 times the amount of people going to an NBA game. You're going to generate 3 times the amount of money. I can spend 3 times the amount of money on product. So I can spend more money on advertising, I can generate more media, I can create more products, things like video games and all that sort of stuff that grows my brand. It's ultimately a rule of marketing. I have more money to throw at my product to make my product more visible to more people. An argument that I really hate to hear because it doesn't have any value is women should be paid the same to be fair. Well, yes, 100%. I would love a real world situation where everything is fair, but it is the nature of the beast. The NBA is a market. It creates a particular product. They are a marketing giant. And what people get paid in the NBA versus the WNBA ultimately comes down to viewership and attendees. You have to start to close that gap in order to start even comparing the revenue that gets paid. Now, this isn't to say that women can't generate viewership. They absolutely can, but it has to be the right product. It has to be exciting. We saw the record-breaking March Madness viewership with 9.92 million viewers checking out the LSU Tigers versus the Iowa Hawkeyes. And why was that? Because people were going in to check out Angel Reese versus Caitlin Clark, two absolute monsters for their teams in monster collegiate teams. So people want to see these players. I don't necessarily think that a lot of people get up and get as excited to see players play in the WNBA, which is sad, but it's a reality. Now, I mentioned in my last point that they're ultimately different products, and product is the next point that I want to cover off. And to start this off, I'm going to give you one of my favorite quotes. It's from Theodore Roosevelt, and its comparison is the thief of joy. You can't really compare these two products because of the fact that they are two very different products. When we're talking about the actual product of the NBA, we first need to understand that the NBA is not even the same against other men's professional basketball organizations. Let me give you a couple of things to understand. Anyone who is a deep basketball fan will tell you that the NBA is ultimately an entertainment organization. How do we know this? You can listen to guys like Luka Doncic tell you that there is different rules.
So you think it's harder to score 30 points in a Euroleague game than it is in an NBA game?
Yeah, 100%.
But there's better players over here.
Oh, way better players. Yeah. I'm just saying because of the rules.
Yeah.
Because the guy can stay. If you have a guy like, let's say, Rudy Gobert, he can stay in the paint on defense 3 seconds, however he wants. Like, just because of that rule, you can have 10 more points easily.
There is different rules. The NBA has 3 seconds rules for offensive and defensive. The court is not the same. The court in the NBA is wider. It is also longer. The game is also longer. In fact, it's 2 minutes longer per quarter. You almost have an extra quarter played across the whole game, which allows for more viewing time, which allows for more highlights to be generated, which allows for more ads to be played, generating more revenue. You're going to hear that word revenue a lot, and unfortunately, it's a big factor into this discussion. Understanding that the NBA is ultimately a media conglomerate. It's an entertainment facility, right? We have to understand that you're comparing it against the WNBA, which really doesn't market itself to make it more entertaining. Now, the WNBA has done certain things to try and make the game a little bit more entertaining. I will say that sometimes some of these comparisons and things that they have done, or even things that have been recommended, have been condescending, and I will not dare make a recommendation to do something stupid like lower the rims or do anything like that, because I think it's dumb. But they have done things like shorten the three-point line. They also play with a smaller ball. The NBA, on the flip side, has done things like made new rules, changed rules, made things to make the game more exciting to the viewer, because for the bulk of viewers that are watching the NBA, they're watching it for entertainment. And this is something that has to be considered. If you want more people to use your product or to consume your product has to be enticing. Although that they're playing basketball, they are not the same. The NBA and the NBL and the Euroleague, things that we can look at and compare as well. They are all basketball. They're all played by men. They all have professional level players, but there is vastly different skill sets in those leagues, as well as styles of play. You can watch the NBA and you will see a litany of, I would say, offensive fouls for some of these, aggressive contact dunks that they have, a lot more athleticism, but then you can compare it against, say, something like the Euroleague. The Euroleague is a lot more of a faster game because it's played on a smaller court, it's played with less time, it is much more of a strategy game. Will you see dunks? Yes. Will you see fancy plays and fancy crazy passes? Yes, you absolutely will. But it is not an ISO league game. There's not going to be one-on-one. It's just not played that way. The NBL is also different to the EuroLeague. The NBL is faster, but it's slower in the half court, and they play much, much more physical than you will see in the EuroLeague. The EuroLeague has an emphasis around completeness as a player, so you will see bigs comfortable with handling the ball, with shooting the three. We are seeing a lot more big shoot threes in the NBA and in the NBL as a comparison, but it is definitely not as complete of a game in the NBL as it is even in the EuroLeague. This is why you will see a skill set difference, and you will also then start to see a viewership difference because the leagues require a certain type of skill. This is the same for the WNBA. It's a different game. One thing that I absolutely will have to say that the NBA, they are a marketing giant. They recently announced that they're going to be partnering with some sort of organization to create ways to view the game in the way of a Marvel movie and basically use AI to change how you can watch a game. And they're doing this because they know that basketball purists are going to watch the game as it is, but then you're going to get kids who want to watch, their favorite player play dressed up as Spider-Man to make it much more entertaining because it's a product. It's ultimately what it is. The NBA has almost created this WWE effect by creating media that allows us to consume the game. In fact, almost every year that a team wins an NBA championship, there's some form of a documentary that comes about for their road to the championship. Looking at it from the lens of being an economist, so thinking about it from an economic perspective. One of the things that I stumbled across was the 10 economic laws, and one of the laws actually explains the difference between these two really, really well. Productivity determines the wage rate. Emotion ultimately plays no part in this. Sometimes when you hear these arguments about why WNBA players should be paid more, it's ultimately being said from an emotional standpoint, and from both ends, from an egotistical perspective, an emotional perspective, and it really doesn't play a part in the success of a business. I can be emotionally attached to a product. That doesn't necessarily mean that I am going to make more money from it. And there isn't that many people that are emotionally invested in the WNBA in comparison to the NBA. So just because you're saying that the product is great and the basketball is great, that doesn't necessarily mean people are watching it. That doesn't necessarily mean you're generating as much money. You can't use that argument. It just doesn't matter. Last thing I want to talk about is my opinion on what they can do to create a solution. I don't necessarily think that you need to do things like lower the rims, or more dunks don't necessarily equal more viewers. I think that's a little bit condescending. I think it's disrespectful to the talent out there that plays in the WNBA, but I do think that there is things that we can do to try and manipulate the game to make it a little bit more interesting. Something we could even consider would be things to fast track professional athletes. I mentioned earlier in the video about the viewership from collegiate players, and it's because these collegiate players have this image. They have this social media presence, and they're able to generate a lot more viewers. A lot more younger players vibe with those players because they see similarities in them, and then they can sort of strive to be them. Players of my generation, players of younger generations, on the men's side, can actively look at a player like Ja Morant and be like, I want to play just like Ja Morant. The same way that when I was growing up, I wanted to play exactly like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. There's going to be figures that people can then attach themselves to have this strive and this goal to watch their games more, and you're much more invested in, and they can do things like changing rules to push talent and promote more talent in jumping into the WNBA maybe a little bit quicker. That's not necessarily going to say that doesn't come with its own problems, but with every problem comes its own solution, and with every solution creates this whole new world of problems. So, these are things that we have to consider. I don't know that they necessarily understand the audience for the WNBA. Expecting more men to watch women play sports is kind of a silly argument again, because if you think about it, more men are going to go out as a group of guys to a sports bar or to a friend's house to watch a sporting event than you will see women band together to go and watch a sporting event. That's not a sexist statement. It's just a statement. It's a general observation. And so you have to understand the audience. The audience a lot more for the WNBA tends to be younger women. It's a factor that we have to understand. It's a different market. We have to advertise to that. How can they do that? Being a little bit more hands-on with the interaction between players and fans. I know that here in Australia, when I was a lot younger, after games, you could go and get signatures from all your favorite players. I would literally like sit in the middle of the court and have a table. At Sydney Kings games, I used to do this a lot, and you could go and get like your little poster signed, and you buy a poster or whatever, and it was a way that you could interact with these players and get a high five or get a photo and stuff like that. They also have the capacity to do something like that a little bit differently with WNBA to close the contact gap. That's going to allow more people to, have an attachment to the league. They could also do things like speeding the game up. I think a faster game is going to make it a little bit more interesting. And so a couple of things that they could do would be maybe even lessening the shot clock. They changed it to maybe a 22-second shot clock or even a 20-second shot clock. It's going to make the game change because the game has to be that much faster. Maybe even shorten the court to make it a little bit easier, not necessarily changing the distance in what the three-point line is, but maybe just changing the overall length. Might make more stretch threes, and that's going to be really exciting to see. So then you have a different way to consume the product. That's just something that I thought of that, I think that might make a difference. One thing that I do think that they absolutely could do a lot more is collaborating with the NBA and even doing more challenges like they had with the Sabrina Ionescu and Steph Curry shooting challenge. Doing things like that could be really, really exciting because more people are going to be like, wow, that player's a really good shooter, or they shot like that, they did that, and it's going to generate more eyeballs on the game, which again means more viewership, which means more money, more revenue generated into the game. Another thing that we could also do is maybe even as a media source, create some sort of an extra entertainment factor. I'm a big fan of the NFL's Hard Knocks series, and I've always wondered why the NBA doesn't do something like that. And if they do, maybe I'm living under a rock and I've never seen it, but the WNBA doing something like the Hard Knocks series, imagine them following around, the Los Angeles Sparks or following around the New York City Liberty to see their preseason process, to see them go through tryouts and to see them go through all the highs and lows of that experience each season, picking a new team. I reckon you'd get a lot more viewers. I know me personally, I would watch it, and I'm sure that there's a lot more people out there like me, which is going to generate, again, more viewers. I've said this a million times before, I've got love for the game. I don't care what gender you are, as long as you've got love for the game and you got skill, I'm absolutely going to be checking you out. The argument of the talent is great, so the product is great, and so we need to be paid the same is really dumb, and it's going to bankrupt your league. It's going to remove the opportunity for you to have a job to play in a professional league, or remove that many teams in the professional league. And so you need to challenge that thought. If you've got a better opinion than the ones that I've raised as solutions, I would love to hear it. Please put it in the comments below. Guys and girls, keep it respectful. If it's not respectful, you're not doing anything but making yourself look like an idiot. That being said, I had a lot of fun talking about this topic. If you've got a topic that you'd like me to talk about, jump in the comments, let me know. Get at your boy at courtthoughts@gmail.com. And until I see you next time, make sure you're looking after yourself and be safe. All right? Peace.